Okay, so there's no such thing as social media law per se. It's really just a question of how the existing laws are interpreted in this new space. So what we're experiencing is that nobody really knows where we're going. We have this incredible revolution that's happened, and suddenly everyone with an internet connection is a publisher. So I used to be at a big law firm called Webber Wentzel, and we used to act for all of the media houses, the journalists, the broadcasters, everybody. I spent a lot of time going around teaching journalists particularly about defamation law, privacy law, hate speech, data protection, advertising law, what does the Broadcasting Complaints Commission say about producing content. So it's something that really affects everybody. If you have any kind of presence on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, or if you have a blog, or if you comment underneath articles on newspaper websites, for example, then you really need to be quite cognizant and quite aware of what the legal considerations are. Can you look at somebody's online profile before you give them a job, for example? Can you fire your employees if they get it wrong? Can you fire your employees if they say something about one of your biggest clients? You know, it really, the arms reach really widely, and people are finding themselves in all sorts of trouble. So I'm a big believer in making sure that if you do take the approach that you want to outsource your company's voice on social media, that you should be very keenly aware that there are legal considerations, that there are reputational considerations, and that whoever is managing that voice on that public platform should have been trained in quite a serious way to make sure they understand what the risks are to the brand and personal risks as well. It is a very complicated web. It really depends on which sector you're in. So, for example, if you're in the financial services industry, you would need to comply with all those self-regulatory codes. If you're a lawyer, then you need to make sure that what you're saying online isn't going to upset the law society. Just because you're online, it doesn't mean that those professional codes no longer apply to you. So that's very, very important. And then it's really just a question of if you're managing the platform on behalf of a company, then you need to know what the laws are. And the laws are very simple, that if you are even remotely involved in the chain of publication, so even by virtue of you just managing the Facebook page, you are as responsible as the person who's commenting on the page. So you're responsible for every word that appears on that page. It's a really difficult thing to understand. I do a lot of work, educational work, going into companies, going into agencies, and teaching them about the considerations that apply to their particular industry and their particular task in social media. But no, there isn't, I'm afraid, any sort of comprehensive guide. It's really just a question of making sure that your company is has individually got to grips with what considerations apply. If you personally are going onto a page, you are responsible for that content. And I think that it's a very noticeable phenomenon that people are prepared to say things online that they would never say in the real world. So people need to understand that if they get it wrong from a legal point of view, that they can be held accountable. Certainly if you're managing a platform and somebody comes onto the page and says something that's totally unacceptable, the approach must be to take a screenshot of that comment, retain all the identifying information you have of that user and delete it. Because as soon as you become aware of it and you don't delete it, you are as responsible as the person who wrote the initial comment. So, so making sure you have that identifying information. We had a judgment in January this year from the South Gauteng High Court in the case of H versus W, which really said that if you want to stop wrongdoing, you should act against the wrongdoer, which basically means that your primary course of action should be against the person who actually wrote that comment, not against the platform, so not against the brand who hosts that Facebook page. If you retweet something, you are as responsible as the original person who tweeted it. There can be defenses. You know, sometimes it's to provide commentary, particularly journalists. They have a defense called neutral reportage, which basically means that, you know, journalists have a duty to keep us informed of what's going on. So if somebody tweets something illegal and they retweet it, provided they give commentary before and afterwards, well then they shouldn't be held responsible, because it's much the same as, you know, quoting that tweet in a newspaper article. But I'd be very cautious of the sort of average person on the street to retweet things that they find offensive, or because of the legal approach that you are responsible. So I think that the real message is just to take a deep breath, think, is this a good idea? And I think that, you know, a lot of what I do is just teach common sense. don't go on Facebook and say that your boss is a dick, because you're going to get fired, and that's perfectly legally acceptable. Just remind yourself that who you are in cyberspace is really just an extension of who you are in the real world.